Emerald sneered at Icarus and held her knife, before asking him to repeat what he had just said. Aurelia shook her head at Icarus, yet he once again shouted at Phonio to leave, which caused Emerald to cackle. She asked Icarus why he was such a softy, yet Icarus replied that Phonio deserved to live a little longer. Emerald's laughter turned to a snarl as she readied her knife, which made Icarus reach for his sword. Emerald laughed and told him to go ahead, but that no matter what he did, she would rip his throat out. Icarus turned to Phonio before saying, "Run, pal," and plunging his sword into the ground near Phonio. A tear rolled down Phonio's cheek as Icarus pushed him away to run, and Icarus turned around to see Emerald stomping her feet on the ground as Phonio leapt into the water and swam towards the mountains. Icarus winced and asked Emerald what was wrong, and she shouted at him and asked him why he had spared Phonio, yet Icarus calmly replied that they could kill Phonio in a more iconic way later on in the games. Emerald scoffed and told Icarus he was not a real career, which made Icarus snarl and scoff at Emerald. He noticed Emerald reaching for a knife, and Spectacle noticed Icarus reaching down for a sword. Aurelia grabbed Icarus while Spectacle grabbed Emerald, in order for the two of them not to kill each other. Meanwhile, Stretcher and Syndicate had fled from the cornucopia and had both jumped into the water. Syndicate appeared to have trouble breathing, which led to Stretcher telling her to jump on his back as he swam as hard and quickly as he could through the water. Although Stretcher had allegedly spent his weekend swimming at the lake on the outskirts of District 12, it soon became clear he had never swam as far a distance as 300 meters. Syndicate squealed as she noticed the courier sorting through the weapons, which caused Stretcher to stop swimming and to grab her. He angrily told her that he had spent the entire bloodbath trying to protect her, and that instead of thanking him, she was acting like an overgrown child in grave times. Syndicate began trembling, and Stretcher raised his axe, before telling her to shut up or he would sheath her. Syndicate, who had been ready to talk back, closed her mouth, and Stretcher grinned, before continuing to swim. Within a few minutes, Stretcher had reached the end of the lake and pulled himself up. Stretcher glanced around to see that he had reached the mountains, and he groaned, before muttering that he wished he had grabbed a claw from the cornucopia. Stretcher told Syndicate that she needed to hold on to him, and with that, he took a breath and dug his hand into the mountain. Stretcher could be seen groaning from the pain in his hands as he pulled both himself and Syndicate up the mountain. Syndicate could be seen trying to adjust her body position, which made Stretcher shout that he was not a train seat, and that she had to stay still. As Stretcher very nearly reached the top of the mountain, Syndicate moved her position, which caused Stretcher to lose his grip and fall from the mountain. He landed in the water and punched Syndicate as hard as he could, before telling her to leave him alone and try to find an ally. However, the couriers noticed the splash and Emerald cheered. Stretcher snarled at Syndicate and swore in a panic, before telling her to climb on his back again as he swam. This time, however, he changed course and swam towards the forest instead. Just then, he heard Spectacle swimming after them with his machete between his teeth, and this caused Stretcher to swear again. Spectacle grinned and raised his machete as he swam, yet Stretcher did not look back and continued swimming towards the forest. Spectacle threw his machete at Syndicate, which struck her in the arm and caused her to cry out. Stretcher glanced at her, before telling her to cover her wound as he swam even faster. Spectacle let out an outburst of profanity, which caused Rubius to laugh and comment that District 1 was acting more immature than usual, but that Icarus was an idiot for sparing the 9. Stretcher began panting, yet he continued swimming until he finally reached the edge of the forest. He threw his axe at one of the trees, and the tree, which was rather skinny, being a pine tree, fell over and narrowly missed Stretcher. He swam towards the tree and pulled himself up, before using the tree as a bridge and crossing over. Stretcher quickly grabbed the tree and pulled it back to the island with all his might in order to prevent Spectacle from pursuing him. As Stretcher and Syndicate rested, they suddenly heard a figure running towards them. Syndicate yelped and Stretcher threw his axe just as Cormac burst through the clearing. The axe missed his heart, and Cormac gasped as the axe hit his shoulder. He doubled over in pain, and Stretcher immediately apologized, before asking Cormac why he had snuck up on them. Cormac grinned and said that he had not known who they were. He groaned from the pain in his shoulder, before pulling off a bag he had stolen from the cornucopia. The bag contained a first aid kit and 3 loaves of bread, which made Syndicate lick her lips. Cormac frowned at her, before using the first aid kit to treat his wounds and breaking one of the loaves of bread into 8 chunks. Stretcher told him that 8 chunks could not be shared equally among 3 people, and Cormac replied that he wanted to wait for Peppa. Stretcher gulped before telling Cormac that he had seen Peppa being shot in the neck by Aurelia during the bloodbath. Cormac groaned before asking Stretcher if he knew the name of Crazy Machete Guy, referring to Spectacle. Rubius said that this was in fact an accurate description of Spectacle, whilst Stretcher said he was the boy from District 1. Back in the cornucopia, the couriers had to leave the island in order for the hovercraft to collect the bodies. 13 cannons sounded, and the group congratulated each other. Emerald appeared to be pleased with Spectacle for his killing of the girls from Tree, which made Spectacle flex his arms. Icarus curiously asked Spectacle how he had thrown the crate, which was known to have weighed at least 200 pounds, which caused Spectacle to laugh and say that he worked in the Carter Emerald mine back in District 1, and this was how he had developed his muscles. Emerald quickly added that she was the daughter of a talented vintner and had grown up carrying grapes from her family's vineyard to her father's wine shop in the town square of District 1. Spectacle laughed and said he knew Emerald from the training academy. Emerald smirked at this before saying, "You're the arrogant and conceited Torag, aren't you?" to him. Spectacle raised an eyebrow, and Emerald told Icarus and Aurelia that Spectacle claimed he could use a spear as good as the best, but a 15-year-old in their academy named Price Malone threw spears much farther than him. Icarus asked Spectacle if he really threw spears worse than a 15-year-old, which made Spectacle snarl and tell Icarus that Emerald wished Janice Castro had been her boyfriend. Rubius slammed his hand onto his microphone at this mention of his former mentee, whilst throwing his head back in laughter. Icarus looked at Aurelia for a moment, before they simultaneously burst out laughing. Emerald swore and jokingly slapped Spectacle on the arm, before telling Icarus that this was not true. Spectacle admitted that this was not true, but that Emerald had told him she would give anything in order to date the powerful lads of 2. Icarus raised his eyebrows as Emerald admitted that this was true. Icarus said he knew several tributes of District 2 she would have not liked to date, and Emerald told him to tell her them. Icarus placed a finger to his chin in mock concentration before saying, "The shameful Lotus and Ulysses who both died in the bloodbath," before referring to a lad named Seneca from the 97th Hunger Games, as well as Julius of the 95th Hunger Games for being an idiot. Priscilla turned to Rubius and asked him what he thought about Icarus's comments, which made Rubius laugh and say Julius had indeed been a little stupid, whilst Lotus and Ulysses had been killed early on in the games, and Seneca had somehow managed to be killed by an arrogant and useless 14 and a tiny little 8, even though he had come so close to victory. Emerald laughed and told Icarus she would not mind dating him either. In an instant, Icarus's smile turned into a snarl and he icily glared at Emerald before telling her that he had a girlfriend already. This is indeed true, as he was dating Harmonia Snow, the younger cousin of President Snow at the time. Emerald shrugged and said she was only joking, which caused Icarus to relax slightly. Aurelia then shared that as her father made little money from working in the mines, she had always wanted to win the games in order for her family to live in the victor's village, but due to her family's poverty, they lived in a small stone house and could not afford a spot in the training academy for neither Aurelia nor Narcissa and their younger brother Pluribus, and so they could not train for the games. However, Aurelia's father had asked his friend Croesus Heat to train the girls, and he had agreed. Icarus smiled and spoke about how long his sword at the Dalton Elite was, and how he had been trained by Rubius in many areas of endurance, including super endurance, pain endurance, poison endurance, and electrical endurance. Spectacle smirked and told him to stop lying, which made Icarus snarl and say, "Well then, how did I score 13 in training?" Which caused Spectacle to angrily mutter that Rubius had either rigged his scoring in order for his precious cousin to earn a good score, or the game makers had been paid by Icarus's mother Aura to give him a high score. Icarus commented that Spectacle was currently asking to be killed by Icarus and Aurelia, whilst Emerald appeared uneasy at what was happening. However, Icarus did not reach for his sword, and instead shifted his body position so that Spectacle could not see what he was doing. He placed his finger in the sand and alerted Aurelia for her to turn her head. He quickly wrote, "Can I be the one to snap his neck?" in the sand, which made Aurelia write, "If you let me pummel her head." Rubius laughed as he saw that neither Spectacle nor Emerald could see what was happening. Icarus then jumped to his feet and asked Spectacle if he wanted to hunt any tributes, yet Spectacle stubbornly told him that they had already killed 13 tributes, which was more than half the amount of total tributes. Icarus rolled his eyes before sitting down and lying in the sunset. He decided to go for a swim in the lake, and he took his shirt off. Yet Spectacle immediately took off all his clothes and told Icarus he had some experience in the field of endurance as well. Icarus frowned as Spectacle jumped into the water and screamed. Icarus burst out laughing as Spectacle began trembling from the cold temperature of the water and tried to put his pants on. Rubius jokingly said, "Someone's not so arrogant," whilst Emerald, Aurelia, and Icarus began laughing. Spectacle scowled angrily at all of them before putting his clothes on and grumbling under his breath. Icarus told Emerald he knew what she meant by arrogant, and when Emerald asked him what his definition of arrogant was, Icarus pointed to Spectacle. Icarus noticed the sun beginning to set and turned his gaze to the volcano on the island, which was beginning to rumble. Icarus winced before shouting at his allies to grab all the bags they could from the cornucopia before the volcano erupted. Aurelia asked him what he was talking about, but upon seeing the volcano, sprinted towards the cornucopia and grabbed 5 of the bags, which she placed around her neck and arms. Spectacle grabbed a mace before grabbing a backpack and diving into the water. Icarus and Emerald both reached the cornucopia at the same time, and both of them grabbed 4 bags each. They both dove into the water as lava began flowing down the volcano towards them. Icarus swore and began swimming even harder, before seeing Emerald gradually lose her stamina after a minute. Icarus appeared to have conflicting emotions, before swimming back to Emerald and asking her to jump on his back. Rubius muttered obscenities under his breath and yelled that Icarus should have eliminated her when he had the chance. Icarus continued swimming, although it was slightly harder with Emerald on his back. As the lava began flowing through the sand on the island, Icarus groaned in despair as Aurelia and Spectacle began climbing onto the ground and sprinting through the forest to safety. Aurelia and Spectacle had both made it, but upon hearing Icarus's cries, Aurelia turned around and ran back to the lake. Spectacle grabbed her from behind and told her not to risk her life for Icarus, yet Aurelia told him to let go, and she sprinted towards the lake. Icarus neared the end of the lake and struggled to stay afloat due to Emerald being on top of him, which made Emerald jump off his back and onto the land. Icarus gasped for breath and leapt out of the water before pulling himself onto the land. As the lava entered the lake and made its way towards the forest, a barrier suddenly stopped it from going any further. Amazingly, the cornucopia survived the eruption, unlike the island. Icarus gasped and emptied one of the bags he had seized, before observing the first aid kit, the block of cheese, and the net that fell out of it. Icarus grinned, before telling his allies that they should go back to the cornucopia now, as the lava had vanished. Spectacle told him the game Icarus had initiated the eruption in order for them to leave the cornucopia, which made Icarus scowl. As the sun began to set, the pack began to trek towards the nearby clearing, where they placed all of their supplies. And Icarus examined how long the net was, before placing the net around one of the trees surrounding the clearing. He then stretched out the net until it covered all of the trees surrounding the clearing, which would make it harder for tributes to steal their supplies. Spectacle and Aurelia both pulled out some cheese buns and canned meat they had in their backpack, which they placed in a small plate our Emerald had received in the cornucopia. As there were 12 cheese buns, Aurelia gave 2 buns to each member of the pack, before using a spoon to place some canned meat on top of each bun. Meanwhile, Stretcher, Syndicate, and Carmack heard the volcano erupting and spotted the couriers escaping it. Little did the couriers know they were approaching the group's hiding spot, which made Carmack swear in a panic and begin to jog away, so as to not alert the pack. Stretcher and Syndicate quickly followed suit, although Stretcher was eating some of the bread. They made it away with barely seconds to spare, as the pack walked into the clearing soon after. The trio made their way into another clearing about 200 meters away, and they gasped in exhaustion and relief. As Carmack relieved himself behind a rock, Stretcher and Syndicate lay on their backs. As midnight came, Horn of Plenty played in the portraits of Tab and the girl from 3, Shad from 4, Samsonite and Solara, both from 5, both of the tributes from 6, Caliente and Root, both from 7, the girl from 8, Tobe and Alejandra, both from 10, and Peppa from 11 were shown, which left just 11 tributes remaining.